class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Rangers, in which the Sharks have lost 6-3. So the first game in this new Bob Booner era as the head coach has left the Sharks once again disappointed. Now 6 losses in a row here, but this game started off pretty well for the Sharks at the very least. The first goal of the game was scored by them shorthanded from Tomas Hertl, who broke off of a pretty significant goalless streak. So it was 1-0 San Jose, and that was actually the score by the end of the first period, but the Rangers would find themselves getting on the scoreboard in the second. They would get goals from Fast and Panarin before Couture would tie it up, and going into the third period we'd have a 2-2 game. So the Sharks, to break out of the slump, only needed to be the better team for a full 20-minute period of play in that third period, and it started off again pretty well. Dillon, with his first goal of the season, made it 3-2 San Jose, their second one-goal lead of the game, but after that the wheels fell off. The Rangers got 4 unanswered goals coming from Zibanejad, Panarin, and Panarin to take the win 6-3 and just leave the Sharks disappointed here even after this big change that just occurred 24 hours ago. The first thing to talk about would be Martin Jones, and it was certainly a tale of 2 games for Jones, as in the first period he was making multiple fantastic saves, and he was really more or less the main reason why the Rangers found themselves off the scoreboard in the first period, because the Sharks defense, not only in the second and third period, but even in the first period, were not very good and were giving up a lot of good chances. But Jones was making those saves in the first period. The difference being in the third period is that he was not making those saves, and in fact he was actually missing some pretty simple saves as well in that third period. You take a look at goals from like Fast, maybe the first goal from Zibanejad. They're not the easiest saves to make, certainly the Fast one in particular, but you take a look at that second goal from Artemi Panarin, the goal that made it 5-3, that really put this one in a difficult position for the San Jose Sharks. This is one Jones has to have. Yes, you can say it's a bit unlucky that it managed to find a hole in him, but you're 4 minutes left in the third period. Your team is down by a single goal. You can't really afford to even give this slight possibility for letting this goal go through. So just a disappointing third period from Martin Jones. I'm not going to say that this game is entirely on him. You take a look at the offense with just 18 shots. The defense was just as porous as ever. But your team finally managed to score 3 goals here, which is the combined amount of goals they managed in the 3 previous games. And you eventually need your goaltender to carry you out of a slump like this, and it just doesn't occur here tonight, and that's one of the main reasons why the Sharks lose once again. Next, I will talk about Bob Booner trying to sort of conceptualize some of the changes that he actually made. Now, of course, Rome was not built in a day, so you can't expect many things to have happened in just a 24-hour period since DeBoer was fired, but you could definitely see there were some, moments where you could definitely tell there was some sort of influence coming from the head coach. I think in the offensive zone, we saw a bit more creativity, a lot less of that passes to the point and just a simple shot on net looking for a tip. There was a bit more cycling going on down low and a lot more creative passes, I guess. This only happened on a couple of shifts. The first line had a very good shift. I think the Thornton line had a couple solid shifts as well. So it was not nearly consistent enough. But again, it's not that surprising that the Sharks couldn't just randomly turn their game around completely with a completely new system in just 24 hours. So we'll see where that goes from there. There is a foundation. We'll see if the Sharks can build on that. I also thought they were a bit more aggressive in the neutral zone. This was more so a thing that I noticed heavily in the first period that sort of fell off a bit in the second and third period. But when it comes to their defensive zone game, it was, as I said, just as bad as it was with DeBoer previously. So that's going to be certainly a work in progress for the team. Next, I will talk about the lineup changes that Booner made, as this is obviously the most obvious change that he did, as he threw most of the lines in a blender. The first line is something we have seen before. Kane, Couture, Meier was actually quite good here tonight, but we saw Thornton centering LeBanc and Tomas Hertl. Hertl finding himself on the wing for the first time in a while, as he seemingly had established himself as a top 6 center here, a top 2 center for the Sharks, sometimes even getting that first line center role depending on the day, I guess you could say. We saw a third line of Marleau, Goodrow, and Joachim Blichfeld, who we'll talk about a bit later, as well as a fourth line of Carlson, Gambrell, and Marcus Sorensen. Now, if there was one thing I would have liked to see is maybe Marcus Sorensen get more of a prominent role here in the offensive lines. I feel like even in some of the losses here for the Sharks, Sorensen has been a pretty effective player, and so putting him on the fourth line seems a bit unfair. So maybe even getting him an opportunity on the second line, maybe putting Goodrow back on that fourth line, getting Thornton to center the third line, and putting Sorensen up on the second line with Hertl in the center, or maybe even putting Hertl on the third line if you want to try something like that. Hertl and Blichfeld could have been interesting. But I am mostly fine with what Booner tried. There were some bits of chemistry, but all in all, it didn't really work out all that well. We'll see if he goes back to the drawing board or if he tries to stick to his guns here. And then finally, I will mention Blichfeld, as I said I would. He was a leading scorer in the AHL when he got called up here, or he led the Barracuda in points, I should say, not the whole league. And now Blichfeld wasn't particularly impressive in the training camp. He wasn't particularly impressive in the preseason, which is the main reasons why he didn't make the main team, but he has looked good in the AHL, so he gets up here. Did he look good in this game? Well, he didn't really get to do much of anything. He had one decent look, which ended up being a shot that went quite high and quite wide. He also had a blocked shot, I guess, that stung him, so a decent block shot there, but he was otherwise not really effective. It's not too much of a surprise when you're coming in with a rookie who really isn't, a hyped up rookie who you expect to just light up the league right away, that this rookie would have, a pretty average game in their first NHL game. So we'll see if Booner actually decides to keep him up here, because I assume the roster move was heavily influenced by the new head coach, or if he decides to, get Gregor back in the lineup, take him out, or maybe even call up somebody else from the AHL, I guess, is still a possibility. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Saturday. They will face off against the Vancouver Canucks, a team who they are fighting for a playoff spot. So while this, loss to the Rangers is tough, especially since it's a 6th loss in a row, since they are an Eastern Conference team, it's not a huge deal for the playoff race as a whole if you want to still consider the Sharks active in that, but this is going to be a very important game against the Canucks. I should mention that the Sharks have played the Canucks once before this season. That was early November. And recall, this was a 5-2 loss. The Sharks did not look good in that game, but after having lost to the Canucks there, they turned it around and had a very good rest of November, only dropping a couple of games and winning a double-digit amount. I believe it was 10 or 11. And so, we hope that turnaround happens prior to the Canucks game, and that does happen, and the Sharks can have a very good end of December. But, maybe the play is to lose the game against the Canucks so that you can have that same effect. But we'll see how the Sharks perform in day 2 or game 2 with Booner leading the way. Class dismissed.